LTC I shall sum up. For a leave travel concession employee is eligible for exemption under section 10 subsection 5. 1 point, available to both Indians and foreigners. The amount of exemption, that point you should remember, the amount of exemption under this clause shall in no case exceed the actual amount of expenditure incurred. Suppose the assessee got an leave travel concession for 50,000 rupees and the actual expenditure incurred is only 40,000. He is eligible for exemption only up to 40,000. The balance 10,000 shall be chargeable to tax. The value leave travel concession or assistance received by from his employer for himself and for any member in connection with proceeding to any place in India, or even after retirement, he may be eligible for LTC, even that it is exempted. The maximum number of journeys which he can make in a period of 4 calendar years is 2. Suppose the associate does not avail that within the calendar year, within those 4 calendar years, he can avail in the next first calendar year, and that will not be considered for considering the next 2 consecutive, for the next 2 travels, for the next block of 4 calendar years. For example, I have earlier given you 2001, 2, 3 and 4 calendar years. He has not availed any LTC. Then in the 5th calendar, 2005, he availed this leave travel concession or leave travel assistance. Then the next comes 5, 6, 7, 8. For those 4 calendar years, the one which he has availed in 5 will not be taken into account. That means he can again take 2 LTC. So much about LTC. Now we have to study with the valuation of perquisites. Valuation of perquisites. Valuation of perquisites. Valuation of perquisites. I told you that perquisites are classified into 3 categories. Tax-free perquisites, they need not be valued at all because they are exempted. Only perquisites which are taxable in the case of, in all cases, or perquisites which are taxable in the case of specified employees, they are to be valued. Perquisites which are exempted, they need not be valued. Perquisites which are taxable in the case of all employees and perquisites which are taxable in the case of specified employees, they have to be valued. They have to be valued. Among these, valuation of residential accommodation. Valuation of residential accommodation. Valuation of residential accommodation. Valuation of residential accommodation, that is given in Rule 3, subsection 1, Rule 3.1. Rule 3.1 deals with the valuation of residential accommodation. For the purpose of valuation of residential accommodation provided by the employer, employees have been classified into 2 categories: government employees and non-government employees. Government employees and other employees. Employees classified into 2 categories: A, government employees, then other employees, that is non-government employees. government employees and other employees. Employees who is a government employee? Employees who are holding office or post in connection with the affairs of union or state. Employees who are holding office or post in connection with the affairs of union or government. That means both union, central government employees and state government employees. Where accommodation is provided by the central government or state government to an employee who is serving on deputation with any body or undertaking under the control of such government. Suppose a government employee, either central government employee or state government employee, he is employed on deputation with a body or undertaking under the government control. There are certain corporations or bodies which are under the control of the government. The value of the accommodation shall be determined as non-government employee. The value of the accommodation, when a government employee is working on deputation with any body or undertaking under the control of government. Government control undertaking work a government employee. അങ്ങനെയാണെങ്കിൽ അവിടെ accommodation value ചെയ്യുന്ന non-government employee എന്നുള്ള കാറ്റഗറിയിലാണ്, and he will not be regarded as government employee. Let us see how to value the accommodation given to government employees. First of all, we have to take an unfurnished house. The value of rent-free unfurnished house will be taken to be the license fee determined by the government in accordance with the rules framed by the license. As far as government employees is concerned, license fee determined by the government. License fee determined by the government. License fee determined by the government with the rules framed by the government for allotment of residence. With rules framed by government for allotment of residence. So for government employees, the value of unfurnished accommodation. The value of unfurnished accommodation shall be the license fee determined by the government for allotment of residence, with the rules framed by the government for allotment. If the accommodation is furnished one, then 10% of the cost of furniture, original cost of furniture. Furniture includes refrigerators, TV sets, radio sets, air conditioner, etc. provided. If such furniture is hired, 10% per annum of the original cost of furniture provided. If such furniture is hired, the hire charges payable by the furniture will be taken into account. So how you will determine the case of government employees? License fee determined by the government with the rules framed for allotment of residence. License fee determined ആണ് unfurnished accommodation. അതിനോട് കൂടി furnished accommodation ആണെങ്കിൽ 10% of cost of furniture. Cost of furniture includes AC also, air conditioner, TV sets, refrigerator, everything. Suppose the employer has hired this furniture, then hire charges paid, that will be added with the license fee determined. Upon value of rent-free furnished accommodation for government employees will be license fee determined plus 10% for cost of furniture or hire charges paid if the furniture is hired by the employer. Now another point is, suppose if any amount is realized from the employee for providing this service, that will be deducted from this license fee plus 10% cost of furniture or hire charges minus any amount realized from the employee. That shall be taken to be the value of rent-free furnished accommodation. This is comparatively easier. Now, how you will determine the value of rent-free furnished accommodation in the case of other employees? Here, license fee plus 10% cost of furniture or higher charges paid by the employer. In the case of other employees, accommodation is provided by the employer. For this, employees are classified into 3 categories depending upon the population of the place where the accommodation is situated. If the accommodation is situated at a place where the population 15% of salary where population exceeds 25 lakhs. Where population exceeds 25 lakhs. %, of salary where the population exceeds 25 lakhs. As per 2001 census. Then 10% of salary, where population exceeds 10 lakhs but less than 25 lakhs. But less than 25 lakhs. But less than 25 lakhs. Then 7.5% 7.5% of the salary in other places. 7.5% of salary in other places. So for non-government employees, classified into 3 categories: 15% of salary where the population exceeds 25 lakhs, 10% of salary where the population exceeds 10 lakhs but less than 25 lakhs, 7.5% of the salary in any other place. In respect of the period for which the accommodation was occupied by the assessee. Accommodation എത്ര നാളാണ് ഓക്കുപ്പൈ ചെയ്തത് ആ നാളത്തെ മാത്രമേ കണക്കാക്കുള്ളൂ സാലറി. ഇവിടെ accommodation owned by the employer ആണ്. Here the accommodation is owned by the employer. Accommodation owned by the employer. Accommodation owned by the employer. Now, suppose accommodation is taken on lease or rent by the employer. Accommodation is taken on lease or rent. Accommodation taken on lease or rent by the employer. അതായത് എംപ്ലോയർ വാടകയ്ക്ക് എടുത്തിട്ട് എംപ്ലോയിക്ക് കൊടുക്കുക. അക്കോമഡേഷൻ പ്രൊവൈഡ് ചെയ്യുന്നില്ല, പക്ഷേ വാടകയ്ക്ക് കൊടുക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ ഇവിടെ പറയുന്നത് ആക്ച്വൽ എമൗണ്ട് ഓഫ് റെൻറ്റ് പെയ്ഡ് or payable by the employer of 15% of salary, whichever is lower. Actual rent paid or 15% of salary, whichever is less. Or 15% of salary, whichever is less. Whichever is less. Whichever is less, that shall be taken to be the value of the rent-free accommodation, where accommodation is not owned by the employer, but employer takes an accommodation lease and give it or on rent and give it to the employee. Then the value of the perquisite for unfurnished accommodation shall be actual rent paid or 15% of salary, whichever is less. Suppose the accommodation is furnished, then when the accommodation is furnished, then 10% of the cost of furniture, or if the furniture is hired by the employer, rental charge paid by the employer, that shall be added with the above perquisite. From the above, if any amount is paid by the employee in respect of accommodation, it shall be reduced and the balance shall be taken to be the value of the perquisite. Suppose the employer has given a notional deposit when he takes an accommodation rent. That's notional interest that shall not be considered for computing the value of the perquisite. So, I shall sum up what I have explained with regard to accommodation. Residential accommodation. For the purpose of valuation of residential accommodation, for the purpose of valuation of residential accommodation, employees are classified into two categories: government employees and non-government employees, other employees. Employees holding posts under the state or central government, there the value of the accommodation shall be considered to be the license fee determined by the government for allotment of houses to the employee, allotment of residences to the employee, whatever be the license fee determined by the government. With that, if the accommodation is furnished, 10% for the cost of furniture, that shall be added. If the furniture is hired, whatever be the hire charges paid by the employer, that shall be added with the value of the unfurnished house. Then you will get the value of furnished house. From this, any amount paid by the employee to the employer for accommodation occupied by him, that shall be deducted and the balance shall be taken to be the value of rent-free accommodation. Now we are dealing with other employees. With regard to other employees are first situation is accommodation provided by the employer. Accommodation employer തന്നെ കൊടുക്കുകയാണ്. എംപ്ലോയറുടെ സ്വന്തം റെസിഡൻഷ്യൽ അക്കോമഡേഷൻ ഓൺഡ് ബൈ ദ എംപ്ലോയർ ആണെങ്കിൽ അത് 3 കാറ്റഗറി ആയിട്ട് തിരിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. 15% ഓഫ് സാലറി is the gross population of the 15% of salary in cities having population exceeding 25 lakhs. 10% of salary if the population exceeds 10 lakhs but less than 25 lakhs. 7.5% in other places. അതാണ് പറഞ്ഞത്. മൂന്നായിട്ട് തിരിച്ചിരിക്കുകയാണ്. ബിഗ് സിറ്റീസ് ഉണ്ട്, 25 ലക്ഷത്തിൽ കൂടുതൽ 2001 സെൻസസ് പ്രകാരം. അവിടെയാണെങ്കിൽ 15%, 10 ലക്ഷത്തിൽ കൂടുതലുണ്ട് എന്നാൽ 25 ലക്ഷത്തിൽ കുറവാണെങ്കിൽ 10%, ബാക്കിയുള്ള സ്ഥലത്ത് 7.5%. ഇനി എംപ്ലോയർ ലീസിനെടുത്തിട്ട് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ വാടകയ്ക്ക് എടുത്തിട്ട്, സപ്പോസ് എംപ്ലോയർ ടേക്സ് എ ബിൽഡിംഗ് ഓൺ lease or accommodation on lease or rent, and he gives it to the employee, then the value of the accommodation will be actual rent paid by the employer for occupying the house or 15% of salary, whichever is less. ഈ രണ്ട് കേസിലും if the accommodation is furnished, 10% for the cost of furniture shall be added, or if it is furniture is taken on lease, then higher charges paid by the employer. From this, first of all, you have to determine the value of the rent-free unfurnished accommodation. Then you have to add the cost, 10% for cost of furniture or higher charges paid. From this, if any amount is realized from the employee for providing the accommodation, that shall be deducted, and the balance shall be taken to be the value of the perquisite. Next class we can deal with the accommodation provided in a hotel. That we can deal later.